of private brand products continue to grow, and retailers are not dialing back on their product development efforts as they work to meet continued consumer demand for quality products that offer good value. But are retailers doing enough to connect their expanding private brand assortments with the digital shopping tools that are now in the hands of consumers? Welcome to Store Brand Spotlight. I'm Greg Sleater, Executive Editor of Store Brands. To discuss this topic, our guests are Tom Cosgrove, Director of Industry Relations with FMI, the food industry, and Chris Costagli, Vice President of Thought Leadership with Nielsen IQ. We'll be discussing the findings of FMI's new report, Private Brands at the Digital Crossroads, a call to lead in omnichannel grocery retail. Tom and Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
An interesting topic, and I think sort of an evolution in how we talk about private label and the next step in private label's evolution as that segment of the business continues to grow. So I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts here on the podcast. Tom, I want to start with you, and I want to kind of really get a big picture overview of the white paper. In reading through this, it's obvious, at least to me, that retailers have a real opportunity to boost the presence of private label on their e-commerce and digital platforms. Give me a sense of what the report said.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Greg, and thanks again for having us. There's a lot that we were able to uncover to really help the retailers and the private brands folks work through this to build their brands within the online presence. But there's some things that we encourage them to focus on. So definitely starting with optimizing your digital content. And we're learning that in all different aspects of this new kind of AI world that we're living in. But they may have an incomplete product detail page, maybe some unoptimized search listings, limited visibility and digital promotions. So we encourage them to invest in high quality content, including clear product descriptions, high resolution images, and optimized search terms that improve discoverability and trust. The second thing we talk about is utilizing substitution opportunities. And one of the things that the report found, thanks to the Nielsen data, was that 27% of online grocery transactions involve substitutions. There's an opportunity there for food retailers to use this as a chance to introduce shoppers to private brands. Ensuring private brand products are well represented and trusted can increase acceptance of those substitutes. And finally, they can enhance their digital shelf innovation. So retailers can take private brands and e-commerce a step further by creating formats like shoppable recipes, AI-powered discovery modules, and influencer-led content. These approaches can help build emotional engagement and brand loyalty.
Chris, as you kind of went through the data and went through some of the feedback you've got, are there certain things that are preventing retailers from giving their private label brands greater visibility, whether it's on the web, in retail media, or on other digital platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you also, Greg, for having me today. I think the most important thing for us to remember is that the shopper wants private label. Shoppers are interested in private label, especially when you think about where we are today in the challenged economy that we're facing, where many consumers are struggling financially. So as we think about some of these barriers, it's not a barrier that's driven by the shopper. The shopper wants these brands. It's really an obstacle or set of obstacles, rather, that exist within the actual retailer's walls itself. And as I went through the material, there were a couple of things that jumped out at me. And I think the first, of course, is that when you think about who owns private label within an organization, we're very fragmented. Teams are very siloed. I think that organizational fragmentation is one of the clearest findings behind some of these challenges. Whether it's the private label team, the e-commerce team, media team, merchandising team, you're talking about a lot of different groups within an organization that have their own independent goals and work very independent from one another. That means that there's no one team that really owns the success of private label in the e-commerce space. That then paired with the fact that all of the different teams have different goals, different KPIs, different incentive structures, that really even compounds the challenge that we have. In the research that was done, there was a senior merchandising leader that I think really put it perfectly. No one owns the digital success of their private lines. It's not in anyone's bonus structure. I think when we think about the fact that we don't have common goals, we don't have common ownership, we don't necessarily have skin in the game, for lack of a better way to say it, that creates a lot of challenges. I think you then take that and you layer on top of it the digital systems that are being used, the execution that we're seeing in an e-commerce space. We have a lot of retailers that are really relying on legacy systems that were optimized for print, were optimized for circulars. They weren't necessarily optimized for the modern e-commerce that we have today. And we heard Tom talk about this a few seconds ago. That means you have maybe low quality or missing images. You have incomplete information about products. You have a shopping experience that creates a lot more friction for shoppers. And that's certainly a challenge to getting private label online and having it be very successful. The last really comes down to the way that the retail media network ecosystem is built. It's really a huge growth engine, but today it's really structured around national brands, not private brands. And I mean, that certainly is a large challenge here. As I think about it, to me, the reality is retailers are ultimately leaving money on the table because the way that the retail media network is set up isn't designed to invest in their own brands. It's really to invest in the national brands that are out there.
Yes, Chris, that's an interesting point when you talk about retail media, because in the coverage that some of our sister publications, Progressive Grocer, and others have done with retail media, this has been a national brand play, and it's an advertising, another way for advertising dollars to flow into the grocers. And Tom, I want to jump back to you on the topic of retail media. This is an income stream now for retailers, and something that a lot of national brands are literally buying into and just, paying to be on there. But if retail media is used as an advertising portal for the retailers to bring in dollars from national brands, what's the incentive to promote their own brands?
Greg, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think it really comes down to a couple of things, but it starts with loyalty, right? So the customer, we've noticed that they go to more stores than they typically have in the past. And so how do you keep bringing those customers back to your store? And private brand is that opportunity for differentiation and retention. So 60% of shoppers return to a retailer because of their private brand assortment, and 73% would recommend a retailer's private brand to others. So as you look at bringing those feet in the door, that foot traffic, that's a big piece of it. They also use private brand as a differentiating opportunity, right? So it's something that only one particular retailer has, or only a certain number of retailers have, depending on how they have their program set up. But again, that goes back to bringing people in and building their identity as a company and as a brand. And finally, this is something, oh my goodness, that we've been focusing on in so many different areas of FMI, and it's data. They have a lot of rich data, the retailers do. And so being able to use that data, they can actually customize everything to really target and personalize campaigns to support their customers and really get to know them and make sure that their customers know that they care for them. So there's a bunch of different things that I guess the other way you could say it is a relationship building opportunity with their customers.
Chris, Tom just touched on the loyalty factor and the differentiation factor. And I think that's something we've heard more about. If I want to buy a 12-pack of Coca-Cola, I can get that anywhere in America. But there are only certain products I can get from Target under certain brands, Trader Joe's under certain brands, and Aldi under certain brands. So there's that loyalty. They also offer, as we know, better margins than national brands. Is there a number right now? Because I think ultimately this is an arithmetic problem. But is there a number or a percentage of sales that private brands have to hit for the retailers to go, yeah, it makes it fiscally viable for us to promote our own brands through our retail media networks because we're not actually getting advertising dollars for it?
Well, in a perfect world, we can always attribute everything to a specific number. But I mean, the short answer is no. There's no magic number that private brand needs to hit before investment in retail media truly makes sense. I mean, when you think about the economics of private label, private brands are growing faster than national brands are. Private brands are capturing share from national brands. So we know that volume is there. We know that the shopper is interested in private label. We know that the quality is there, the trust is there, the uniqueness is there, and that's really building a strong consumer foundation. So the economics of private label are certainly already there. The barriers go back to some of the things we've talked about. It's the organizational challenges that retailers are facing around private label that is kind of causing that hesitation, that desire for a magic number. The retail media is really still being structured around national brands, certainly is a challenge. And that essentially means that private brands don't and won't get the visibility that they deserve. When I think about private brands, high household penetration, strong shopper trust, solid value proposition, especially in today's market, and there is certainly proven competitiveness against those national brand players that are out there. I think it really comes down to retailers needing to think about that incentive structure, the ownership structure. If a retailer can get those things right, private brands are immediately going to see a benefit from that. So again, short answer, there is no magic number, but there are certainly things that retailers can do that will more strongly position their private brands for successful investment.
Chris, you touched on this earlier, some of the outdated internal KPIs and things like that. And you mentioned there's an unidentified or executive, or maybe it was multiple, from some top retailers who cited this lack of alignment under investment in digital private brand content, the KPIs and things like that. Are these the same executives that maybe have the power to change these KPIs, or does this need to start at a higher level at these retailers?
I think ultimately it needs to be at a higher level. I think that these executives certainly can exert influence over the KPIs and influence potential change, but I don't think that these leaders necessarily have the unilateral control to say this is what it is from today going forward. So I think there's a bit of work to be done in figuring out who actually is the right group within an organization that can make those changes. I don't think it's a problem with willingness. I think it's more or less the problem is not sitting with the right group of people today. If there's no single leader that owns the organizational system that's really designed around their digital first private brand growth, that leads to a big challenge. If there's nobody that's accountable for it, if there's nobody that owns it, who ultimately has the authority to change what those KPIs are? So I think in order for retailers to really overcome that, we've got to have someone that's accountable, somebody that's removing those barriers, somebody that can truly establish clear ownership, clear team alignment, shared KPIs. I think even as far as something like market share, the market share should be a core brand health measurement. And we shouldn't just be thinking about that in the in-store space. We should be thinking about that online as well. Private brands should be tracking their market share growth in the online space. And that should be something that incentives, bonuses, overall performance objectives are tied to. I mentioned it a little bit earlier on, but I think skin in the game truly makes a difference. Bonus structures, incentive structures, all should be linked to those KPIs because it will more effectively get people to focus, be aligned, and really drive private brand growth, not only in store, but also in the digital space.
Tom, some of the changes that need to be made, I'm curious of the data that's in the report, or maybe some other data that FMI has, is I guess the lack of change, or the fact that the changes haven't been made, an oversight and part of an evolution of an industry that is growing? Or does it signal maybe that private label is not get quite the priority for those sitting at the C-suite level?
I think that's an interesting question and something that we definitely want to continue to look at within the community. But I'll tell you that some of the research suggests that 95% of food retailer reports that private brands are extremely or very important to the organization. 86% plan to moderately or significantly increase their investment in private brands in the next 2 years. So I think one of the things that we talk about this a lot at FMI as we look at the different projects that are going on is there's typically we try to make sure that we do a crawl, walk, run method in anything we do. And so I think you'll think about before COVID, there was definitely maybe crawl, maybe some walk when it came to online shopping, omnichannel. But certainly when COVID hit, some people went from crawl or even pre-crawl to straight to run. And so I think part of it is going to be really thinking about where those steps were, looking back and seeing what they need to really focus on now that they have their feet almost under them. So it's not necessarily a lack of priority. It's more becoming more sophisticated with those private brands and integrating that all kind of to Chris's.
Tom, I want to stay with you for a moment. And I find it interesting because we talk about this need for private brands to expand its presence on all these digital and e-commerce channels. And then we have Gen Z, who is really showing a proclivity for buying private brands, but there's not that overlap. So with retailers needing maybe to do more for digital, is this an opportunity, or are they missing an opportunity not only to drive sales in the short term, but really build that brand loyalty? Because you've got, Gen Z now, they've got a little more money in their pocket, they're aging, and at some point they're going to be hitting those milestones in life where it's, kids, marriage, house, things like that. So is not being on the digital platforms a missed opportunity maybe to kind of continue building that brand loyalty?
I would say yes. They definitely need to continue to build that brand loyalty, and in order to do that, they need to be online. So as you look at who's buying those private brands, you'll see that the younger generations are purchasing more of those private brands, and it's more likely to drive where they shop. They're also doing a lot more online, right? So they need that kind of seamless experience between the online and in store. And I think that's something that I've seen change during my time at FMI, is we're not looking at things in silos, or the in-person shopper, the online shopper. It's really kind of interconnected. And I think the best way to explain it really is kind of what we were talking about before we got on. I'm in the DC area, and we just had a foot of snow, and I want to go on and see, what stores have what products in advance so that I can go in and get them. And so having that seamless experience for me personally is huge, so that I can plan accordingly. And I know that's a study of one, but I know that there's more of it out there.
Having two experts on the same podcast is fun for me because I get to have you guys crystal ball a little bit into the future. One of the things we've seen with shoppers in recent years is this willingness to turn to private brands for a variety of reasons. And then an overwhelming majority are sticking with them. And I think something like 60% of consumers said they would actually buy more if there was greater variety. So, Chris, I want to start with you. What, in your opinion, do retailers need to change in their digital approach regarding private brands to drive even more sales?
First and foremost, consumers already here. I mean, you said it, 59, 60% say that they're buying more private label today than they were a year ago. So the shoppers here, the consumers here, they want private label. They're really waiting on the retailers. Trust is high when it comes to private label among shoppers. The value is high. Consumers see private brands as being good alternatives that drive a lot of value over the national brands that are in store. So shoppers here, it's on the retailer to really make the next move. As we talked about today, the biggest problems that retailers face in the space is that they just don't have an ecosystem built today that's really designed to be supportive of their private brands. They've got to get that shelf right. You have to have the right photos, quality photos that allow a consumer to truly understand what a product is in a situation where you can't pick it up in your hand and move it around. You've got to be able to see all the sides. You have to have a product description that is written in the way that the consumer thinks, using the words that the consumer uses when they're ultimately shopping online. There's a disconnect between the way a consumer thinks about a product, or the word choice that a consumer uses on a website to search for a product, and what the retailer is actually delivering in the product title or the product description. Those private brand items might not even show up. So we've got to be in a space where retailers really have the digital shelf figured out for their private brands. And that doesn't stop there. I mean, we have to go past that. It has to also include investment in retail media. It's not just something that's out there for name brands. We have to make sure that private brands are in that space as well, and taking advantage of the growth engine that that retail media is really enabling for name brands that are out there. And the last is really around those silos. It's breaking down those internal silos, getting teams aligned, having combined goals, digital KPIs that the organization is working towards, not this fragmented approach that we have today where nobody really owns it, nobody's really being held accountable for the performance. So until we start to see retailers really modernize in this space to present the products right, promote the products right, organize the organization right around private brands, we're not going to see the demand really being captured. We know the shopper's there. We just need the retailer to get there.
And Tom, same question to you. From your point of view, what do retailers need to do to change their digital approach regarding private brands to, even further drive sales?
I think Chris covered a lot of it really great. I don't just want to say ditto, but as I thought about the question as well, things like unifying the teams and breaking down the silos is huge. Rethinking the metrics. I know we talked about that earlier in the podcast around KPIs and who's incentivized or scorecarded against some of the metrics. Elevating private brands in general, not just in store, but across every touch point. So digital, ads, media, however you can do that. And the last thing I'll say is we need to make sure that everybody knows the urgency behind this. Whoever is quicker to jump on this is quicker to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that arise from bringing their private brand across all their platforms.